Hello, F1 fans. Welcome back to the F1 Masters podcast brought to you by AUBG Daily. As usual, you're with myself, Vasco, and Jari. And in this episode, we're going to be discussing the 2025 Bahrain Grand Prix weekend, which was quite eventful actually compared to the last few races. So we have some things to definitely go over. But first of all, let's begin with practice.
In FP1, many young drivers were given a chance, and I think it was 6 drivers. And otherwise, in practice, McLaren were comfortably ahead of the others, and Alpine also showed promising pace. Pierre Gasly was in the top 8, I think.
He was second in practice in FP1.
In FP2 and 3, he was also solid. And a highlight from practice was when Fernando Alonso's steering wheel detached, which was quite bizarre. And otherwise, not that much happened. I think we can move on to qualifying.
Once again, in practice, it was looking like McLaren have the best pace out of all. And qualifying, I think, proved that with Oscar Piastri taking the pole position. But we saw a real bottle job from Lando Norris, who ended up being 6th, despite having probably the fastest car on the field, which was strange, but absolutely contrarily to him, we saw Pierre Gasly taking P5, cementing his very good pace throughout the whole weekend. And what do you think about Pierre Gasly's pace, who was like 5th in Alpine? I think he has these quite a few races throughout the seasons that he just proves that he's a very elite level driver.
Yeah, it was a slow start to season for Pierre and for Alpine. They were the only team going into this weekend yet to score points. And he out-qualifies Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton. I mean, just incredible performance from him. And even with also you had the Mercedes grid penalties, he moved up another spot and started 4th on the grid. And he was running in those top 6 the whole race pretty much, and unfortunately got overtaken by Max at the end, which we'll get onto later. But very impressed with Pierre Gasly. And other things from the qualifying important to note, I would say, is that Oscar Piastri dominated qualifying and took pole position. The Mercedes, they finished 2nd and 4th, but both received a 1-place grid penalty for entering the pit lane, the fast lane, before the restart time was announced. What were your thoughts on this penalty? 1-place grid penalty, the same as Max Verstappen last year for the Qatar incident. I think this is such a stupid penalty. 1-place grid penalties are absolutely irrelevant and should not even be done. And I don't even think this is penalty worthy, because who cares when the restart time is announced? They'll just sit there for longer and their tires will get colder, so it's actually worse for them anyways. So I don't see any reason for a penalty here.
I also don't think they should have been penalized, but I think that just should serve to Mercedes, to be more careful when taking decisions, because it is a matter of seconds. I don't think it would have mattered whether Russell and Antonelli would have gone out of the pit 5 seconds later or 5 seconds earlier. So I don't think that is penalty worthy, but I think just all the teams should be more careful, because with FIA, you never know what penalty they would give and for what they would decide to take an investigation into a certain driver or a certain team. But I think they continue to be inconsistent with their decisions at some point, and that is why I think most teams should be a bit extra careful when taking such risks.
I agree, and I hadn't known about this rule until this race. I don't know how the FIA decided this is penalty worthy, but I think we can move on. Other highlights from qualifying: Yuki Tsunoda actually got into Q3, guys, which was the first time for the second Red Bull driver this year. And Vasco also has a prediction on that, but later on. And also, it was bizarre that Nico Hülkenberg's lap was deleted 45 minutes after the session ended. And this cost Alex Albon Q2 because he was 16th on the verge of qualifying. And then Hülkenberg started 16th, actually, right?
Yeah.
And it was very strange.
Another highlight that we saw was the crash, a serious crash from Esteban Ocon, and everything was fine with him after that, but it was disappointing to see him, as we saw that he has pace, and throughout the race we also saw that he has quite serious pace. But great thing that Haas managed to repair the car and Ocon was fine and he managed to take participation into the race. Also for the Red Bulls, this was the first time throughout this season, despite only only 4 races in. This was the first time when both Red Bulls managed to out-qualify both RB cars, which is a bit pathetic in my opinion. But as we saw throughout the whole weekend, the pace wasn't there for Yuki Tsunoda and Max Verstappen, and despite them managing to snitch into Q3, Max Verstappen, I think he got the best out of this car, and still he managed to be 7th, and Yuki Tsunoda, I think it was just too hard for him, and it was visible. He was, I think, more than 0.6 seconds slower than Hamilton, and Hamilton didn't have the best lap. So really tough Q3 session for both Red Bulls.
We can move on to the race now, and our top 3 finishers were Oscar Piastri taking his second win of the season, George Russell in second place, and Lando Norris in third place. And it was quite an eventful race start, we can say. Firstly, we had Lando Norris, who made this great start, and I remember I was watching it and I was extremely surprised by the start that he made. And then you see on the replays that he made a false start. He was outside of his grid box, and yeah, very clumsy stuff from Lando Norris, and that pretty much describes his entire weekend, honestly. Very, very bad driving, I may say, throughout the entire weekend.
Actually, the fun part was it was Max Verstappen who spotted that Lando Norris was out of his grid position, and he was a bit snitchy. He was like, engineer, like Lando Norris is outside of his position. And in general, agreed, not the best weekend for Lando Norris, but still managing to have so bad pace, so poor performance, and still being third, I think that works for Lando Norris and for him chasing the driver's title. And I want to switch to Oscar Piastri, and I think this race was real proof that Oscar Piastri actually is a title contender, and nobody should consider him as the second driver at McLaren, because currently, from the beginning of the season at least, he had bad luck in the first race, I think. But despite that, I think Piastri has been better than Lando Norris throughout the season so far, and I think right now we should consider him the main title contender, probably.
It's still too early to say. I mean, Oscar is still behind Norris in the points, but it's very close. Verstappen is close. George Russell, who we'll also talk about, he has been incredible this season. But yeah, very impressed with Oscar Piastri. And another person that was very impressive was Kimi Antonelli, once again just making moves throughout the field and gaining positions. And after a great qualifying, he was having a great race as well. And then just the strategy, the safety car seemed to really kill his hopes for anything. And it was sad to see that he ended up not scoring any points as a result of this.
Yes, I was also very concerned with what happened with Kimi's strategy, because he was running comfortably in P4 or 5, something like that. And then they stopped right before the safety car, and then when the safety car came, they stopped again, and he ended up P14. He tried to climb up the field, but he managed to only P11. And considering his driving during this race, like, he made an excellent overtake on Carlos Sainz, a dive bomb, which I think is, for me at least, is gonna be overtake of the month for now. It was incredible, and he shows maturity beyond his age, and it's really an unfortunate ending to the race for him.
Another thing that we saw in the race was the battle between Lando Norris and Charles Leclerc, and I saw all the memes actually, which I consider pretty funny, with that like Lamborghini behind the tractor, but the Lamborghini cannot overtake the tractor, and that was the situation between the two of them. But in the end, Lando Norris managed to get the third position in the race, and also despite the poor weekend of Red Bull, still Yuki Tsunoda managed to grab 9th position, which I think, considering all the circumstances, is alright for Red Bull. And Max Verstappen, he managed to get 6th place despite having really bad pace throughout the whole weekend, with an overtake against Pierre Gasly in the last lap. So I think the weekend in general can be considered as bad for Red Bull, but at least they limited all the problems, all the issues. And I think like getting 10 points out of a weekend where you were probably 4th fastest car by far, I think this has been alright for them.
Yeah, it was quite poor pace from Red Bull, but I will say Yuki Tsunoda actually improved from Japan and was pretty close actually to Verstappen, and I think that's the kind of pace that Red Bull expect from their second driver. So I was actually glad to see Tsunoda in the points throughout the whole race, and good job for him. Shame about Carlos Sainz, who had a great qualifying, also was better than his teammate, and that contact with Yuki Tsunoda unfortunately ended his race and is still only on 1 point in the championship. And it's a shame because Carlos Sainz was driving great and he deserved a result out of that.
He also had a really good start, I think, to the race, but there is one team who managed to capitalize on that and to capitalize actually on everybody's mistakes, let's say from Mercedes and the way Kimi Antonelli was left 11 from the poor pace of the rest of the field and from Carlos Sainz not finishing, and that was Haas, with Esteban Ocon taking 8 and Oli Berman taking 10, which is another positive result for Haas.
I wanted to also say about Haas that they were very impressive and they've moved up to 5th in the constructors now, and for a team that was absolutely nowhere in Australia, completely behind everyone else. Their strategy was great. Oli Berman started last and he finished in the points in a Haas. Great performance, 3rd points finish in a row for him. Very impressed with both drivers, and I love what Haas are doing, and I hope that they can finish as high up as in the standings as they can, because right now they are currently best of the rest.
And also for Esteban Ocon, who crashed his car, finished 14th, and all that problematic stuff with him, managing to get 8th position and actually being with quite a good pace throughout the whole year so far. Him and Berman, I think, are the unexpected great duo of the season so far, and I think we can move to the drivers and team standings. And I want to acknowledge that we talked about this before the start of the show, but this is the first season in a long time when I think the middle of the field looks actually quite competitive, and we're only 4 races into the season, and the worst team has 6 points, which is like the amount that the bottom 2 teams get after 20 races in a regular season. And I think we see difference in the power of the teams and in their performances in every race, and I hope we can get that till the end of the season. Let's say in one race we have better pace from Racing Bulls and Alpine, and in another race we have better pace from Haas and Sauber, and I want to see a very competitive field between 5th and 10th.
Yeah, I agree. It's been very interesting in the midfield, also very interesting in the top, and more specifically the Drivers' Championship, because the top 4 are all, I think, firm championship contenders. Lando Norris on 77 points, Oscar Piastri on 74, Max Verstappen on 69, and George Russell, we actually haven't talked about him this episode, but he's on 63 points. He has had 3 podiums in the first 4 races in a car that is really, I feel like he's outperforming that car. He is in the mix with the McLarens almost every race. I've been extremely impressed with George Russell. I would say behind Oscar Piastri and maybe Max Verstappen, he has been firmly one of the best drivers on the grid this year, and I'm very impressed with him.
I continue to say this, that George Russell throughout the race, most probably you won't notice him, but he's there and he has really good qualifying pace. He has been growing and he has been using his amazing potential in the past few years to continue his development, and right now I think he has reached the point where he's the team leader at Mercedes. He's the one who is there every race, and I think he's the only driver who has been in top 5. He has been in top 5 in every race so far.
Yeah, Lando Norris as well.
Yeah, but George Russell, really shout out to him, and I think if he continues with that great pace and if we see some relatively good upgrades to the Mercedes car, why not him being at least for a moment a championship contender too? Because right now, skills-wise, he's definitely there.
I agree. He's Mr. Consistency right now. And Mercedes also provide him with a better machinery this year, so he actually may have a chance. I mean, also for the constructors, Mercedes are doing pretty well. They're second, only behind McLaren, which is very impressive. Nobody expected this. Everyone was hyping Ferrari up, but Ferrari are P4 right now. Also because of disqualification, obviously, but still, do you guys think that Ferrari can maybe climb up the order in the next few races?
We haven't talked about Ferrari much this episode, but this was actually their best weekend of the season, even though it's P4, P5. And I think they will definitely be disappointed with not coming away with a podium. Charles Leclerc started on the front row, and he had a great weekend, actually. He showed great pace. And Lewis Hamilton in the race, impressive overtakes and managing to get up to P5. Good performance, and the upgrades worked definitely, but they still need more. They have more work to do. But I think Ferrari are beginning to build up their season, and I think pretty soon, actually, in the next few races, they will begin challenging for podiums. Every race, actually, I expect it, especially with the drivers getting more comfortable with the car.
I guess that would be it. My only concern is with the qualifying pace of Ferrari, and with Charles Leclerc, I think at moments he's overperforming the car at qualifying. But with Lewis Hamilton, there is the other problem. I just don't feel comfortable at looking at Lewis while qualifying, because I always feel like he would underperform a bit, or he would not feel the best at this car, and that is why we haven't seen the best results. And this weekend is a proof of that. He was 19 qualifying. But if he manages to find his pace in quali, and as you said, if they continue to upgrade the car, then I think we can see great things from Ferrari. Not McLaren level, but at least being probably the second best car on the field. And last thing to note, I think, that was the poor performance from Racing Bulls, I think. And
Very surprising. They were great the first two races, don't know what happened.
Which was a bit strange. And once again, Leon Lawson, not feeling great at this car. I don't know if it is something with his confidence, or I don't know, he just lost his amazing driving skills. But he has been looking as the worst pilot on the grid throughout this season, comfortably, I think. And another thing that I want to acknowledge is that Aston Martin are 7th with 10 points, and all of these 10 points have been scored by Lance Stroll, which is crazy for me.
Yeah, Fernando Alonso has had his tough moments this season. I hope he manages to pick up the pace somehow. And I think we can move on to our fun rubric now. And I'll start with my highlight of the weekend, which was, I already mentioned it, Kimi Antonelli's dive bomb overtake on Carlos Sainz. It was beautiful. I enjoyed it very much.
My highlight of the weekend is Oscar Piastri domination. Absolutely deserved this win, and I love this guy every day more and more. And even if he doesn't win the championship this year, one day he definitely will win the championship. And as he grows more and more, I think he'll be a force to be reckoned with for many years.
Shout out to Oscar Piastri, to Kimi Antonelli, but for me, the guy that deserves the statement highlight of the weekend is Pierre Gasly. Super fast in qualifying in not a very competitive car, probably 8th or 9th in general in pace, the Alpine, but Pierre Gasly managing to score P5 in quali and actually start P4 from the grid. And after that, having a really solid pace and only losing his place to Max Verstappen in the last lap of the race. I think we saw really great things from Pierre Gasly, and I hope that would continue, because I think he has the skill, and with a bit better car, I think Pierre Gasly can do miracles.
And my surprise and disappointments of the weekend are actually the same as Vasco's ones. My surprise is Haas, and my disappointment is the Mercedes strategy on Antonelli.
Kimi Antonelli, he had a great weekend, but there are just these weekends when, despite you being super good, just things are not going your way. And if everything was alright for Kimi, I think he could have scored at least probably P5, P4, even going the long way, but this is a long shot, but probably going on the podium. I don't know, because with Lando Norris's pace and all that stuff, but that just wasn't his weekend and Mercedes' weekend. And with Haas, P8, P10, very promising for them for the next races.
I also have Haas as my surprise of the weekend. Very impressive strategy and pace in the race. My disappointment, Lando Norris, and this is pretty much from a psychological perspective. He is clearly very weak mentally, and I don't think he's prepared for championship battle. And I think that for now at least, even though he's very talented, very quick, he is not prepared mentally like Max Verstappen. Like Oscar Piastri is much stronger mentally, makes much less mistakes. Lando Norris this weekend was filled with mistakes, and even George Russell. All those other three guys are much more consistent with the car and their performances. And Lando Norris, I believe that on any day he can be comfortably on pole position and comfortably win a race by 20 seconds. But when his back is against the wall, he absolutely crumbles. And this weekend was very disappointing from him, and I expect more from him in the future.
And our last part is the predictions and reactions to our predictions. I had two horrible predictions for this weekend. First one, Haas P19 and 20. I regret saying this right now. And the second one, Fernando Alonso scoring points. He finished P13, so he was not that close.
Were you hyped when you saw that Oli Berman was P20 and Esteban Ocon crashed his car, and probably you thought that you're a really crazy genius?
Yes, I expected them to finish in these positions, but then the race turned out to be completely different, so yeah. And actually, I'll say my predictions as well for the next race. Firstly, Mercedes podium, which is, not that much of a surprise. And the second one, the winning margin in the race is going to be over 20 seconds.
That's interesting. Jeddah, I think there can be safety cars there, knowing the walls, so difficult to get 20 seconds, but we'll see. My predictions from last race, first of all, Pierre Gasly points, predicted that, easy. And my second one, very close to happening, but one McLaren off the podium, but Lando Norris, he had to overtake Charles Leclerc, of course he did. So only one right for me, but I'm the only one actually with a right prediction this week, so there is that. My predictions for Saudi Arabia, new driver on the podium, so basically not outside of Norris, Piastri, Verstappen, and Russell. They've been the four drivers that have only stepped on the podium actually so far this season. A new driver will be on the podium. I don't know who, but it will be someone else. And also a new championship leader, very tight in the points, and I think Lando Norris is beginning to crumble, and I wouldn't be surprised if either Piastri or Verstappen or even George Russell overtake him next weekend. So those are my predictions.
I'm just interested, this is outside of the predictions, but who do you think has the best chance to be the new driver on the podium, if you had to take a wild guess?
I would say Charles Leclerc, not just because he's my favorite driver, but last two races he's finished fourth. And he has been great in qualifying. He started on the front row. I think he is improving. The car is also improving. And I think Ferrari definitely would be in the mix. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Kimi Antonelli as well. He has been great, and I'm waiting for that podium. He deserves to get one this season, so we'll have to wait and see. But one of those two for sure.
Definitely, I think Kimi Antonelli would be on the podium sooner than later. And about my predictions, double Williams points, horrible. Carlos Sainz, he would have been in the points, I think, if there wasn't for the crash and for him DNFing, but you never know. And Alex Albon, he was 12th, I think. 12th, nothing impressive for him. And the closest prediction in the university that never happened is that in the universe, that Yuki Tsunoda would be in top 9 in qualifying, which turned out to be horrendous because Yuki Tsunoda was P10, and I just felt like it would be genius for the first time. Q3 appearance for a Red Bull driver. I was like, you can be better than, let's say, Pierre Gasly or Esteban Ocon or Fernando Alonso, whoever is there, but guess what? He wasn't. And he was very far away from that, which makes me reconsider my alternative predictions. But I guess we wouldn't have laughed on that if I was super boring and I said, oh, Yuki Tsunoda in top 10. And my predictions for this week are no McLaren pole position, which would be, so far from 4 races we have seen 3 pole positions from McLaren, but I feel like they would be the best car, but we can see some heroic performances in the qualifying session. If I have to guess, I would bet my money on George Russell. I feel like he had a very strong qualifying pace throughout the whole season so far, and it is about time for him to take a pole position. And I don't know, a week from now when we're discussing everything that happened, George Russell would have been P17 in qualifying with my luck. And Jeddah, very fast circuit, one really long straight line at the start final, and I think it is quite dangerous usually because it is a rather narrow track, so that is why I think we would see at least 4 DNFs, and this is my prediction. And these DNFs, they would come, I think, with at least one or two safety cars, which would make the race interesting. So I hope we'll have a crazy race with a lot of interesting things happening, with interesting driver on the pole position, and in general battle between the top teams and the middle of the field. So I hope a week from now, when we discuss Jeddah, we would have witnessed probably the best race of the season so far, hopefully.
I think we can wrap up this episode. This is all for today from us. We're looking forward to the next episode. Till then, like, subscribe and follow us on AUBG Daily on Instagram and Facebook, and stay tuned for more of our content. Thank you, and remember,
If you no longer go for a gap that exists,
You're no longer a racing driver.